What we shouldn't accept is that all Indigenous leaders are committed to an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice enshrined in the Constitution during this term of Parliament. They want Indigenous people to have a say. You bet they do. But do we need this particular adjunct to our Constitution? And for more, I'm joined now by Northern Territory CLP Senator Jacinta Price, who gave us a truly powerful parliamentary maiden speech this past week. And if you haven't seen it, you must go and see it. Jacinta, welcome. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
What did you make of yesterday's announcement, the way in which it was explained, the amount of detail we got, and the question which has now been put on the table?
Well, I think what is really dangerous about it is the fact that the question is so simple that it doesn't define the detail of what the voice might look like, that effectively what the Prime Minister is asking for is the nation to say yes to a Trojan horse. So we say yes to this huge constitutional amendment. This is not something you do willy-nilly. It's a huge constitutional amendment, and the details are supposed to follow after. That's not something that I can agree with, and I'm sure there are plenty of Australians that cannot agree with this. And having just come back from Ghana myself, there are people in remote communities who do not have a clue. You know, make no mistake, this is being driven by elites who have largely been part of the gravy train, an industry that has been built on the backs of the misery of marginalised Indigenous Australians. And enshrining a voice is enshrining their voices into Parliament to ensure that they can never be removed or dismantled.
See, not only would they not understand what's about to happen, because we haven't got as much detail as we should have, but they have life and death scenarios that they face on a weekly basis. They're not interested in a group of people sitting around a table in Canberra somewhere having a say about the next Indigenous grant.
Exactly. This is why it must be understood. This is driven by those from the upper echelons, those who have managed to gain an education, take advantage of what the modern Australia has had to offer, who are doing completely fine. This is being pushed by them because it's those people in remote and regional parts of the country who don't understand what this voice is about, who are not connected to that, who don't even have the capability to make those steps to be heard, and who have largely actually been ignored by this very class that I'm talking about, this elite class. They have been ignored by them, and it's those voices that need to come through. But it's up to us as elected members of Parliament to ensure that they are being heard. That's why we have a democracy. So what we're doing, what the Prime Minister is asking is for us to enshrine another bureaucracy and into the Constitution, and that is very dangerous.
And it belittles your job. It belittles the role of any Indigenous person in Parliament. It belittles the role of federal ministers. It belittles the role of state and territory ministers. What did you make? I know you've been travelling today, Jacinta, and for a long time, and you've only just arrived in Canberra, but what did you make of the mainstream media's plaudits? They were everywhere. And this twisted argument that if you don't support it, you're some kind of saboteur.
The mainstream media are actually part of the gaslighting. They have got a lot to answer for. They are not connected to these people out in remote communities. They're not interested in them. They're pushing this gaslighting agenda, which is almost like a dictatorship that suggests that they're using emotional blackmail to push Australians toward a yes vote. And we have to be very, very careful with this, because emotional blackmail is not how we should be thinking when we go to any sort of referendum vote. We should be asking things like, one question that we haven't really had answered at all is, what is the cost to this? What is the bill to the taxpayer for this? And who misses out as a result of this costing, this money that's going to go to establish this thing? There are a raft of things that are missing that aren't being spoken about. And again, we're not being told about them by the Prime Minister. We're just saying, look, he's just saying, vote for this and everything else will come after. That's not good enough.
No, and it's unprecedented. I want to raise something. We've made 3 attentions to Indigenous Australians or focuses in the last week and a half. But this is a disgrace, Jacinta. So we've spoken about the symbolism of having another adjunct to the Constitution and the Parliament. which is, to me is another symbol primarily. But then at the same time, we've lifted the rules on access to alcohol in the Northern Territory. We've gotten rid of the successful cashless welfare card. We're brilliant at symbols in this country, but we're absolutely hopeless at making change.
That's exactly right. And this is what I argue, okay? So we're being told by the Minister for Indigenous Affairs, for Indigenous Australians, and the Prime Minister that they're going to listen to voices, but they have absolutely ignored the concerns and the cries of people within the Northern Territory, Indigenous health organisations that usually I stand on the different side of politics to because they are predominantly Labor supported, but they've been crying out for so long to stop alcohol back out into communities. The Territory Labor government has ignored their cries, and so has this current government now. And for this current government to get rid of the cashless debit card during this time is actually feeding the misery and feeding the dysfunction out in these communities. And they claim to have the interests of Indigenous Australians at heart, and they're using the term heart, you know, the Uluru Statement from the heart, but they are completely and utterly ignoring these voices.
Yes, there's got to be about symbols, you see. You can't make a difference. You've got to get the symbols right first. It's appalling. I want to return to your remarkable maiden speech this week. Here's part of what you said for those who didn't get it all.
It is the same attitude we hear with platitudes of motherhood statements from our now Prime Minister, who suggests without any evidence whatsoever that a voice to Parliament bestowed upon us through the virtuous act of symbolic gesture by this government is what is going to empower us.
Does it excite you? Because it excites me that you have a bigger platform now to make a change in the Senate of Australia.
Absolutely. This has been my aim the whole time. You know, it's really funny because now that since I've delivered my first speech to Parliament, all of a sudden there are all these mainstream media outlets that want to know me, want to hear from me, want to know what it is that I have to say, when I have been talking about these issues for years and years and years and attempting to get their attention. And all of a sudden now, I'm sitting in the Senate, I can say these pieces, I can talk the truth, and they want to know. They want to hear these things.
Good.
They want to hear my voice. They know that I can bring them ratings. It's like, where are the priorities for some of the mainstream media in this nation?
Well said. A warning to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander viewers too. The following story contains images and names of people who have died. Sad to hear of the passing of ARIA Hall of Famer Archie Roach, Jacinta.
Oh, it was deeply saddening. I learned this last night at the Gama Festival, and everyone that was around just, I think at that point in time you could hear hearts breaking. You know, Archie Roach was one of these remarkable, extremely talented troubadours that could sing, and when he sang and the words that he offered connected with Australians from so many backgrounds. You know, my own husband, who's a singer-songwriter, was absolutely heartbroken because he always said that he'd love the opportunity to one day sing with Archie. To him, like so many people, we were so deeply moved by his music. So it is very saddening, a very sad time for the whole nation, for someone who brought Australians together of all different backgrounds.
And never lectured, Jacinta, just told his truth.
Exactly, exactly.
All the very best for your second week in Parliament. Jacinta Price, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Chris.